Hey everybody, this is Brian with Bear Cards 34, back with another video on some cards that I picked up recently. Two of the three cards I'm showing are really nice vintage cards from my collection that I got as part of my birthday and Father's Day. And that would start off with this one right here. Two of these three cards are vintage, and one of them is a vintage player. And so I'm really happy to add these to my PC. The first one here is a 1948 Bowman Don Kent. He was a defensive back and halfback from the University of Wisconsin, and he played for the Bears from 1947 to 1955. I picked up this card because I saw it on eBay. It looked appealing to me because he was a Chicago Bear, so I didn't really know much about him, but after ordering the card, I took a look at his career, and it was quite interesting, actually. So he spent the first few years with the Chicago Bears playing both offense and defense, and he was playing offense with Sid Luckman, one of the greats of all time. But then later in the career, he was mostly just a defensive player. But he led the team for many seasons in interceptions. He made a Pro Bowl in 1953. And the funny thing is, twice George Halas got so upset with him that he kicked Don Kent. The first time was a Dallas Texans game where Halas reportedly saw Kent laughing with one of his teammates after a loss to the Texans. And I think Halas didn't take too kindly to Kent not taking the loss a little more seriously. So he ran across the field and kicked Don Kent. And I thought that was pretty funny. But then I saw that there was another story against the Packers where Kent had kind of missed his coverage or something like that, and the Packers scored a touchdown. And that Halas ran over and kicked him then too. I think in the knees, I think is what they said on that one. Now, Kent did say later that Halas had apologized to him for those moments, but for whatever reason, Halas, didn't take too kindly to Don Kent on a couple of occasions anyway. But he really did have a really good career with them. You know, like I said, he was a very talented player on offense and defense. He played college ball at Wisconsin, and after college, he did serve in World War II, where he earned 2 Bronze Stars. And he passed away back in 2000, but his son, Don Kent Jr., very briefly played with the Bears in 1987. When Kent retired, he had 21 interceptions, he had a defensive touchdown, 4 rushing touchdowns, and also 2 receiving touchdowns. So I'm very happy to have that card right here. It says one of the Bears' prize rookie backs gained 266 yards to lead Bears halfbacks. A fast, strong runner promises to develop into ace ball toter in 48th season, may be shifted to fullback position because of speed and shiftiness. It's kind of cool. They got the football helmet right here. Fine grain leatherette, inner padding for extra protection, junior size for children's. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I love those old vintage cards. So there's one right there. Next up, this is a vintage card that I already had. This is Harlan Hill. Love Harlan Hill. I first got into him from watching a Chicago Bears documentary on the history of the Bears, and they highlighted him, and so I was always a fan of his after that. I remember also there was a really great video by Terry over at TJ Maxx Vintage Cards and Nostalgia where he talks about some of the players who, what could have been. Harlan Hill started off just right out of the gates as a great player, but unfortunately injuries really hampered his career. So the pickup I got here was this really nice autograph. This is a 2010 Panini Threads Gridiron Kings, and this is the autograph number 25 out of 50. But yeah, very happy to be able to get that autograph right there. Harlan Hill was the 174th player picked in 1954 by the Bears. And as a rookie in 54, he was Rookie of the Year. He had 1,124 yards. A year later in 1955, he was the NFL MVP. And he was also an All-Pro in 1956, made a Pro Bowl all 3 of his first seasons. And that's when the injuries really started taking over and really slowed his career. He played through the 1962 season. That season he split with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Detroit Lions. And I did see that after his career he went on to become a teacher and then a principal. He passed away back in 2013. But that's a nice autograph. Love when they actually do a real signature. So thank you, Mr. Hill, for that. But yeah, very happy to be able to add that autograph to my Chicago Bears collection. All right, so the final pickup, I'm going to go ahead and if you guys would humor me for a moment here. I was on my way to work and I was listening to the sports radio station here in my home state of Utah, and they were doing a little segment on one of the hosts was asking the other if he knew how many Hall of Famers, Pro Football Hall of Famers there are from the state of Utah. And there are not very many Hall of Famers. And so they talked about BYU, and assuming my memory is correct, there was just one, and that was the great Steve Young from BYU, just that one from BYU. And then if we went over to my alma mater of Utah State, currently there is just one, and that would be Merlin right here. Merlin Olsen, one of the all-time greats, the only Utah State Aggie in the Pro Football Hall of Fame currently. Now I will say, there is one that is just a shoo-in, and you guys probably know who that is. If you're familiar with the NFL, that would be B-Wags, Bobby Wagner. He is definitely going to make it into the Hall of Fame. This is his rookie auto right here. And I was in grad school when he was playing, so it was a lot of fun to be able to go to the games and watch him, and then to see him win a Super Bowl and make, a dozen Pro Bowls, lots of All-Pro teams. So great player right there. So he will definitely be going in at some point. And then for the University of Utah, at least up until just a few years ago, University of Utah only had one as well, and that was Larry Wilson, great defensive back from back in the day. So Larry Wilson, until just a few years ago, was the only Utah Ute in the Hall of Fame. And the reason they had asked all of those is because they then went on to highlight another player, and that's where this card will come in. But before I do, I'll mention there are also a couple, with BYU, if Fred Warner keeps this trajectory, he could make it to the Hall of Fame. With the University of Utah, I do think Steve Smith is most likely going to make it. Loved watching him. Great player. And then there is a chance, Eric Weddle, multiple Pro Bowls, or many Pro Bowls, multiple All-Pro teams, and then coming out of retirement after 2 years to win a Super Bowl with the Rams and be a key player on that defense. That might have moved him up potentially. There is potential there anyway. So anyway, like I mentioned, Larry Wilson was the only one until just recently, and that's where this card will come in. So right here, and I've opened up the box. I haven't taken it out yet, but here we go. So it had to go through the eBay authentication, and so let me just move that out. And there we are. Awesome card right there. Max Speedy, 1950 Bowman in a PSA 5. And here's the back. Definitely be taking it out of this. I always hate these stickers that block off the card. And definitely an eyesore on the front as well. But anyway, you'll see on the back here, Cleveland Browns right there, 1950. So I want to tell you a little bit about him because he had quite an interesting story. And that was what it really intrigued me when I heard his story and when they were talking about him on the radio. And then I thought, man, I need to go see if he has any cards and see if I can pick one up. Now, he does have a 1951 Bowman as well, which is a fantastic card, great image. So I'm hoping one day to have that one as well. But very happy to have this rookie card. So let me tell you a little bit about Max Speedy, because it's an interesting story. So Mac was born 105 years ago. He was born in Odell, Illinois, but he grew up in Utah, in my home state. He grew up in Salt Lake City. That's where I'm from. Went to high school there. And I want to mention, this is part of what makes his story so interesting. He had a rare disease called Perth's disease, which stunts the growth, or there's a loss of bone mass in the hip joint, and it affects the blood supply in the leg. So in childhood, he wore a leg brace for 4 years, and there was no guarantee that he'd ever be able to really, function without that necessarily. And he was able to overcome that. And down in Salt Lake City, he became a star athlete at his high school, playing football, basketball, track. He mentioned, I have a quote written down here. He said, when he got out of his leg brace, it was like turning a frisky colt out to pasture after years in a box stall. And he said that he wanted to play everything he could all at once as long as he could. So he went to the University of Utah, where he played football, basketball, and track. The Utah team at the time was called the Utah Redskins. They're now the Utah Utes for the Ute tribe out there. But he, just like with Don Kent, he actually was in World War II as well. And he was drafted by the Detroit Lions in the 1942 draft, but he never played with them. He went off to war, and then after war in 1945, Paul Brown, who had been the head coach of a military team that played against Speedy's team, offered him a contract for his new AAFC, that's the All-American Football Conference, called the Cleveland Browns, which later on would be one of 2 or 3 teams that were brought over to the NFL later on. And so he played. He was there with Otto Graham and Marion Motley, and they dominated. So he even said that being able to play pro football was a dream come true. And when he went to the Browns, he was on a dynasty. So with that, there was one. I think it was it Marion Motley or Otto Graham? Anyway, one of them mentioned that, with him playing, having that bout of Perth's disease, that it really caused him to have an odd gait, which made it so it seemed like he was like doing fake plays even when he wasn't trying, and it really came to his advantage that way. But he did well right off. So with the AAFL, he had the first touchdown catch in AAFL history, and the Browns went on to win 4 straight AAFC championships from 1946 to 1949. Then they went over to the NFL, and they won the championships in 1950. And so they really proved any doubters wrong that they deserved to be in the NFL with that win. Then they went on to play a couple more championship games, which they lost. But again, they were just very competitive right out of the gate. Mack was a 5-time All-Pro. 3 times he was the AAFC receiving leader. 2 times he was the receiving yardage leader. And he has the AAFC record for the most reception yards in a season with over 1,100 in 1947. And there's a cool quote from Tom Landry, who once covered Speedy in a game. And he said that game it was, quote, the most embarrassing athletic performance of my entire life. So Landry had a great respect for Speedy as well. In 1945, or 49, the team moved to the NFL, like I mentioned. And so because of that, with the AAFC disbanding, he was the all-time receiving and receiving yardage leader. And winning that 1950 NFL championship was just a huge thing for the Browns. Now you have to wonder, with all that he did, why was he not in the Hall of Fame? So he went from, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, 2010s, not in the Hall of Fame. And he had a lot of teammates who were really advocating for him to be there, including Otto Graham and Marion Motley. They had both been really advocating for him over those years as well, while they were still around. And there is a report that from the teammates that Paul Brown would get on Max Speedy's case pretty regularly. In fact, Speedy wasn't taking too kindly to the way he was being treated. And one year at training camp, he brought a skunk to training camp, and he named the skunk Paul. So, yeah, there was maybe not any love lost between the two. And maybe partially because of that, but probably more likely because the Canadian Football League offered him double his salary that he was making in the NFL. They were kind of doing the same thing that the USFL would do later, where they were trying to take some of the stars and paying them more money. So the Rough Riders offered Speedy twice his salary, and he signed with the CFL in 1953. And Paul Brown was not happy. He threatened to sue. In fact, there's a quote from Max Speedy that says, "Coach Brown told me when I jumped leagues he was going to get even with me." And Otto Graham had said that Paul Brown definitely was not good at letting go of grudges. So anyway, after his career in the NFL and the AAFC, he had averaged more than 800 yards a season. And again, this is when there were way less games played and the game was a completely different beast than it is today. So that 800 yards a season average during his 7-year career was something no other player would do again for 20 years. He did make the 1940s All-Decade team. And Otto Graham actually came out with a quote saying that his quote is, "Quite honestly, I think Paul Brown is the reason that Max Speedy would not get into the Hall of Fame. That Brown would just not forget it." And so anyway, in 1977, Speedy told the story of running into Paul Brown, and he introduced himself and just said, "Do you remember me?" And Brown's reply was, "Yes, I know, you're the one who went to Canada," and then he walked away. So definitely, again, kind of like maybe an ultra serious compared to Kent and Hallis getting kicked a couple times. This one just went on for decades. And so there was a lot of talk about Speedy getting into the Hall of Fame, and it just never happened. Now in Utah, Speedy was inducted into the Utah Sports Hall of Fame back in the 70s, but unfortunately he passed away in 1993 and never made it into the Hall. Anyway, years and years later, on January 15th of 2020, Max Speedy was finally inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And again, I didn't really know his story until they were talking about it on the radio, and they were telling about the Paul Brown feud and his talent, his numbers, about Autogram and Marion Motley and some of his other teammates advocating for him to get into the Hall for many, many years. And finally it happened in 2020. And I watched the Hall of Fame ceremony, and his daughter and grandson came out and gave a talk, and it was really, really nice. It was really great to see that. It was a nice tribute in honor of their father and grandfather, and so we finally made it. So anyway, that's the card. Yeah, very, very, very happy to have that card, and happy to be able to take it out of this as well. I will go ahead and void it, or will I? There we go. Okay, so here we go. There it is, right there. Nice looking card, and great story, great player. And again, overcoming the obstacles that he had with his leg, fighting in World War II, making it into the AAFC and the NFL, and really dominating during those 7 years before he switched over to the CFL. Very happy to see him in the Hall of Fame. Very happy to know of his story and to be able to really appreciate this card. Very glad to have it in my collection now. That'll be one of my favorites for sure. And yeah, so that will do it for today. But for me, those 3 cards, a couple of Bears PCs and one local guy, very happy to add those to the collection. I know that was a little bit of a longer video, so if you stuck with it and you listen to the stories about these 3 players, I really do appreciate it. And again, this is what these cards can be. Yeah, they're just cardboard, right? But they're also a story. They're a history of the game, a history of the players. And again, with Don Kent, I didn't even know who he was. I just saw this old Chicago Bears card and thought, that's pretty cool. But then to be able to go back and look at his story and hear of his impact and his career and the funny little interactions with George Hallis, is just interesting, right? And Harlan Hill, just such a great player for those first 3 years, as good as anybody in the league. And Max Speedy and his journey to finally make it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's really nice to be able to have these and add them to my collection. They've come to a good home, and I appreciate all of you guys for watching. I hope you're all doing well. I'll be back with more videos in the near future, and as always, go Bears.